I'm Mark Halperin.
And I'm John Heilemann. And with all due respect to Paul Ryan, we'll put you down as a maybe. Happy National Moldy Cheese Day, sports fans. In our lineup tonight, the fundraising numbers ain't lying and Bernie Sanders ain't crying. But first, the next Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan. Mitt Romney's
Paul is looking at it, but it's his decision. If he decides to do it, he'd be an amazing speaker, but he's got to decide on his own.
Should he do it?
Yeah, it's a very good chance.
No, I would not run against Paul Ryan. I try to be as clear as I can. If Paul Ryan gets in the race, I'm a huge fan of Paul Ryan. I would support Paul Ryan.
The fact is, his time is now, and many of us believe he will answer the call. I think he's gone from a hard no to he knows he has to consider it. All of us are trying now to make sure he understands that the support will be behind him if he chooses to do it.
Mitt Romney's 2012 running mate and the current House Ways and Means Committee chairman is under enormous pressure from all sides to pull his party's fat out of the fire and run for the speakership. His answer is no. Definitely not. Almost certainly not. Probably not. He's got no news to make on that right now. So, Mark, does that mean he is going to definitively be the guy?
He might be. Right now, it's the most likely option. He's flying home to Wisconsin. There's a recess now for 10 days. He's going to talk to his wife and have his first serious conversation about it. Look, his dream job is to be chairman of Ways and Means. He's never wanted to be speaker. He doesn't want it now, but he understands that most people in the party, not all, but most think he's got no options. He's got a lot of questions to deal with. Can he do this job and still spend time with his kids? Speaker involves raising a lot of money. And would he be any better at taming the conservatives in the House conference than John Boehner was?
Those are all really good questions. I will say two things. The first is that this whole spectacle has got me feeling a little like Charlie Rangel. I thought I'd never say that. I got a smoothie here out in L.A. so I could watch this whole spectacle. The second thing I'll say is that the truth is that yesterday, I said this man will be the Speaker of the House. I still believe that in the end, Paul Ryan is a party guy. He's a guy who cares enormously about a lot of different things, but the future of the Republican Party matters to him most of all, and I think that in the end, he's going to feel, not just because of the pressure, but because of what's in his own heart and what's in his own sense of priorities, he's going to end up rising to this challenge.
I think it's pick 'em right now. Look, there are a lot of arguments of why he has to do it. He doesn't have a backup option. No one else at this point does. But he loves being in Wisconsin. He hates fundraising. He loves policy. He doesn't like schmoozing with members. There's nothing better for him about being speaker, and I think he might decide to try to help them find another solution in the end. But if you ask me to push, I'd say you're right. There's no other alternative. Everybody wants him.
Yes, and I'll tell you what he really doesn't like most of all. He might like all those things. There's certain things he doesn't like. There's things he doesn't like. What he really likes is the survival of his party, and what he really doesn't like is the idea that the whole thing is going to descend into chaos and mayhem over the course of the next year at least.
He's still skeptical that it's so as apocalyptic as that, but we'll see. All right. In just a couple minutes, we're going to show you what our Iowa and New Hampshire focus group said about some of the so-called rising alternative candidates in the Republican race, Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz. Until then, though, here's something for you to chew on. From this July to the end of September, Ted Cruz raised $12 million for his campaign. That is twice as much as Marco Rubio. Neither of them, though, comes close to what Ben Carson raised. That's $20 million. John, how cautionary should Rubio's haul be for him, given that he seemed to have a pretty good quarter otherwise?
Well, look, I think it should be very cautionary to a lot of people who think that Marco Rubio now is playing kind of in the pole position in this race. And people have been telling us over the last 2 or 3 weeks that going so far as to say they think he's the front runner in some ways. This tells you that a lot of people have been underestimating Ted Cruz, maybe overestimating Marco Rubio. Rubio still has a lot of momentum. You can't dismiss that. But the truth is, Cruz's money and his hold on a very important part of the Republican electorate makes him stronger than many people understand.
It's not just the money. Cruz has got a better organization in Iowa than Rubio has anywhere. Cruz is organizing in some of the states after the first 4 better than Rubio is. And Cruz has a hold on a certain portion of the electorate. Rubio is still looking for a constituency. So the money is both a reflection of that and a metaphor for that. And I think Rubio's people can spin this any way they want. But that is not a lot of money for a guy who had a hot hand for a lot of the quarter.
I agree with that, and you'll note I did say that Ted Cruz has an important hold on a part of the Republican electorate. We agree about that. We're not disagreeing. I just think the biggest problem for Cruz is that he continues to not show, like Jeb Bush, to not show that much traction in terms of actual voters. And you can raise a lot of money, but if the voters aren't into you, you're just not going to be the nominee. And Cruz is still being overshadowed in a way that Rubio can be an alternative to Trump. Cruz right now has not wanted to try to be an alternative to Trump, and as long as he's not an alternative to Trump, he can be overshadowed by Trump. I don't see that changing anytime soon.
He took his toughest shot at Trump today, said he wouldn't be the nominee. That's a sign of things to come.
Maybe things are changing. Okay, in just about 100 hours, the Democrats push their chips onto the table in Las Vegas for their first debate. Hillary Clinton has the most to lose. Bernie Sanders isn't even doing debate prep. Joe Biden will probably be at home with a bowl of pasta and a soft-serve ice cream cone. Oh, and Martin O'Malley, Jim Webb, and Lincoln Chafee will be in Vegas, too. Mark, among all of these Democrats, the 5 on the stage and the 1 looming just off stage, who has the upper hand going into Tuesday night's debate?
I think Sanders does. I think he'll be a little nervous because he's never done anything at this level in his whole life. But he's out doing events over the next few days. He's doing a rally in Arizona, a rally in Colorado. He's doing Meet the Press, which is already taped. He's appearing at this No Labels event on Monday that a bunch of candidates are doing by satellite. Hillary Clinton is hunkered down. I think the biggest advantage Sanders has, besides the confidence that he's showing doing these events, is if Hillary Clinton makes one mistake in this debate, she will pay for it. Sanders has a bigger margin of error that gives him the hotter hand.
There's no doubt that he has bigger margin of error. I agree with you about that. But I will say she has been on a roll for the last week. She has been emboldened. She has been strong. And this experience thing you talked about can't be underestimated or overstated. She has done a lot of debates. She did a lot of them with Barack Obama, and she kicked his butt in virtually every one back in 2008. And having that experience on a nationally televised presidential debate stage, it's going to give her an advantage over Sanders that you can't gainsay.
A lot's up to the moderators, but I don't think anybody in this debate is going to gang up on anybody but Hillary Clinton. And I can think of 17 issues off the top of my head that she'll be on the defensive on. It's hard to see where Sanders will be on the defensive, again, pending the moderator questions.
All right, we'll see.
All right, from Sin City to Vin City, coming up, former Congressman Vin Weber of Minnesota, a friend of Paul Ryan, joins us after this. Once, when former Congressman Vin Weber was on our show, he made a little news about Mitt Romney. Tonight, we're hoping he makes a little news about Mitt Romney's 2012 running mate, Paul Ryan, former Congressman from Minnesota, and a friend of Paul Ryan. Vin Weber joins us from our D.C. Bureau. Congressman, thanks for joining us.
Hey, great to be with you guys.
So your friend Paul Ryan, as best everyone can tell and by his own acknowledgement, doesn't really want to be Speaker. What do you think of these efforts from into the House of Representatives and from other leading Republicans to basically force him to take the job?
Well, I completely understand why they want him. Paul is a friend. He actually worked for me at one time. He's a great leader, maybe the best leader the Republicans have in elected office right now. And I think he would do a great job as Speaker of the House, and I'd be excited about that. I think they got to be just a little bit careful about overdoing the pressure on him. He really does not want to do this because he really likes the job he's got now as Chairman of the Ways and Means Committee. The Speaker's job is a fundamentally different job than writing legislation, which is what he wants to do. And they just have to be a little careful about putting excessive pressure on him, but I certainly understand why they want him. He would be a great Speaker.
Congressman, sometimes people in Washington panic and overreact. In this case, there seems to be a pretty broad consensus that not only is Paul Ryan the best choice for Speaker, but that there's no other obvious choice and that any other choice has a lot more peril associated with it in terms of dealing with the fiscal crises, and et cetera. Do you agree with that analysis, that there's no obvious second choice that's even close to Paul Ryan?
Well, that's a tough question, Mark, because I do think he's the best choice. He's an extraordinary talent, and he would be the best Speaker they could have. But no, he's not the only person there that could do the job. And part of the reason I'm a little uneasy about the level of pressure that's been put on him is that it hasn't allowed some of the other very competent people like Greg Walden or Mac Thornberry or my friend John Klein from Minnesota, any of these people who would be competent speakers, to be talked about and thought about. There are other people that could do this job, but I agree, Paul would be the best.
Ben, let me ask you, people see this as a moment of total chaos in the Republican Party, with Boehner stepping down, McCarthy coming in, McCarthy now stepping down, no obvious or clear Speaker to be. Is this all bad for the Republican Party? Or let me put it a different way. Make the case that it's not all bad for the Republican Party.
Well, you usually have a period of some chaos before you create something good. So I don't necessarily project this out for the next year or so and say that it's all bad. I do think that what's happening in the presidential race and what's happening in the House Republican Conference, although they are very different phenomena, are reflective of the fact that the electorate as a whole, and particularly the center-right electorate, doesn't know exactly what it wants right now. It's unhappy with the direction of the country. It's unhappy with the leadership that they've had, but they don't know exactly what they want. Look at the candidacy of Donald Trump. And I mean no disrespect to Donald Trump, but he's not a conservative. He's barely a Republican, and yet he's rallying more Republicans to his standard, at least at the moment, than anybody else. That doesn't say anything bad to me, except that we don't know exactly where we want to go. And if you look at the House of Representatives, that's exactly where we are now. They didn't want Kevin McCarthy. They didn't want John Boehner. They want Paul Ryan today, but the truth is the party doesn't know exactly where it wants to go.
Is there a way for the establishment to regain the whip hand? Is there enough of an establishment left to regain the whip hand? And if not, what is the future for the Republican Party?
No, I don't think there's going to be an establishment restoration, if you will, anytime in the foreseeable future. Obviously, if we get a president elected, a new establishment sort of creates itself. But this is a period that's going to be characterized by a lot of turmoil and a great deal of grassroots activism, and I don't think that there's a way for establishment Republicans to reassert control over this process, nor do I necessarily think it's a good thing. I think you have to let it play out.
And Ben, just to finish where we started, what is your message? Speak directly to those who, as you describe it, are putting too much pressure on Paul Ryan to take this job. What would you tell them?
I'd say back off and let him make the decision. All the appropriate, from what I understand, every bit of pressure, every argument has been made to him from every conceivable quarter. At the end of the day, you've got to allow him to make a personal decision. He's a person of enormous integrity and humanity as well as intellect. Back off, let him make this decision, and you don't want him to be dragged into this job if he doesn't want it.
Okay, former Minnesota Congressman, a leadership member and friend of Paul Ryan, Finn Weber. Congressman, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
When we come back, you guessed it, the last little bit of our focus groups from Iowa and New Hampshire, touching on some new candidates we haven't seen talked about so far after this.
And now, the thrilling conclusion of our Bloomberg Politics Purple Strategies simultaneous focus groups of undecided Republican voters in Iowa and New Hampshire. Yesterday, we showed you what they told me and Mark about the outsider candidates. Here's what they think of the insiders, a.k.a. the flailing establishmentarians.
3 words or less. Jeb Bush.
Out of touch, overrated, and weak.
Overrated, competent.
Shannon, Jeb Bush.
Underwhelming, underdog, fighter, underdog.
I think he would be overshadowed.
Experienced, well composed.
Experienced, but I think he at the same time has a lot of baggage.
Not really qualified.
Anyone in the room with a strong view about Jeb Bush? No one in the room with a strong view about Jeb Bush. Hands in the air if you think Jeb Bush is a conservative. No one in the room thinks Jeb Bush is a conservative.
I couldn't tell you enough about him.
Is anyone here familiar with Jeb Bush's tax plan? Raise your hand if you're familiar with that.
I don't know what.
Didn't know we had one.
Why do you think Jeb Bush has not caught fire more with the Republican Party?
People want something new. People don't want a politician.
He's the typical politician. He's way out of touch.
I just don't think he's asserted himself enough.
I feel like he's tepid. I think people think he doesn't have it in his belly.
Just can't believe people are going to get behind another Bush again.
His baggage is just, it's always going to be there. You can't take away the good or the bad of the Bush administrations.
I liked both Bushes, though.
However,
so you all, I think it's America. You generally feel good about the Bushes, but two's enough? Is that the...
Exactly. Yes. We've been there, done that.
What's the source of his appeal?
Of Bush's appeal?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, by the polls, I don't think there is a lot of appeal.
He knows how to work through politics, and that's a big, even though people don't want it to be that way, that is a big part of being in Washington.
Yes. You want to sit down and have a beer with him? I mean, he seemed very approachable.
I think he'd have chocolate milk, though.
John Kasich.
I don't know much about John.
I don't know much about John.
I don't know much about John either.
John Kasich. You know who that is?
I don't.
You don't?
No idea.
Anybody have 3 words or John Kasich? Anybody who, for John Kasich, comes out, anybody have strong feelings about John Kasich? No.
Intelligent, but no chance.
So Governor Kasich talks about having been chairman of the Budget Committee in Congress in Washington, a 2-term governor of Ohio. Who finds that appealing?
Not me.
Jennifer finds it appealing. Anybody else find that appealing? Marie? 3 of you find that appealing.
I think that he's done a good job, with changing the economy and creating jobs to an extent. Here's my biggest thing, and I'm sorry, guys. I'm tired of the same old politicians getting up there saying the same old thing over and over again, and every debate's the same. We're going to change taxes, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, and nothing ever gets done.
I just think that he would get caught up in the same old politics as usual.
Yeah. Robert, why don't you find it appealing?
Glorified accountant, basically.
Everything he's done hasn't changed a thing for where we are now. He's been in that game with all the accounting. He's been right there in the thick of it, and he's part of the problem.
Chris Christie.
He's there.
Who thinks Governor Christie has a good chance to win the primary? Raise your hand. Nobody.
I mean, he's intelligent. I think he knows the Washington game, but beyond that.
And Chris Christie.
In your face.
Lost touch. Not impressive to me, although he's done good work in Jersey.
Passe.
Corrupt.
Obnoxious.
Intelligent, wild card.
To Jersey.
So, Mark, the conventional wisdom, I would say, is that a lot of people in our business and politics think Jeb Bush could still be the Republican nominee, John Kasich is a plausible nominee, Chris Christie maybe even. I saw no evidence of that in Iowa and New Hampshire, and it was one of the biggest takeaways from these focus groups for me. How about you?
Those are the 3 of the 4 main establishment candidates left in this race, and there was very little awareness of the 3 of them, and what they knew, they were not interested. There's tons of establishment vote to be had, even in this age of the outsider. Any of those 3 guys, I suppose, could turn it around, but as you said, the focus group suggested all 3 of them are having serious problems with voters in Iowa and New Hampshire. The polls reflect that, and the textured voices of those voters reflected it too.
And I'd say it's deepest and most problematic for Bush, of course, because we've been hearing the same thing from focus groups back in the spring through the summer. We're now in the fall in Iowa, New Hampshire. We have not found any enthusiasm at any point this year. And for a guy as famous as Bush and with such high expectations, if I was watching these focus groups, it would send a real chill down my spine if I were Jeb Bush or his people.
And I'm not surprised Kasich isn't well known in Iowa, but in New Hampshire,
right.
The PAC supporting him, the super PAC, spent millions on ads. Yep. He's gone up and down in the polls there, but it's just amazing the lack of awareness of him and lack of support for him in New Hampshire.
All right, let's take a look at one last piece of video from the groups. Let's look at this a little snippet of the alternative kind of on the rise candidates who might fill the void.
I think he could be a good president. I think he's conservative. His command of the facts, especially on foreign policy, is better than any of the other candidates running.
What do you think the source of his appeal is?
His ability to cut directly and immediately to the core of most issues.
Severin, Marco Rubio.
Honest and straightforward.
Young, energetic, honest, conservative.
Statesman.
New ideas, innovative.
I think he's young blood, but inexperienced.
How many of you have some doubt or a lot of doubt that Marco Rubio, based on his age and relative inexperience, is ready to be president? Some doubt or a lot of doubt that he's ready? Okay, so about half of you.
I think he could, make a good president, but I don't think the time is right.
I think of him almost as being a better candidate for vice president.
Here he is from that last Republican debate in the Simi Valley.
Have an understanding of exactly what it is Russia and Putin are doing, and it's pretty straightforward. He wants to reposition Russia once again as a geopolitical force. He is exploiting a vacuum that this administration has left in the Middle East. Here's what you're going to see in the next few weeks. The Russians will begin to fly combat missions in that region, not just targeting ISIS, but in order to prop up Assad. What he is doing is he is trying to replace us as the single most important power broker in the Middle East, and this president is allowing it.
What do you think of that performance of talking about foreign policy? Did that seem strong?
Spot on.
Spot on.
Spot on.
Yeah.
So far.
Clairvoyant.
When he said it was spot on. We knew that was going to happen.
How many people agree with what Marco Rubio said just there? Unanimity in the group.
Well, what he said has happened since then. So obviously he had a good handle on what was happening.
I think it shows his understanding of foreign policy, and I feel like our current administration doesn't have that understanding.
Is it appealing to you as a Republican that he is a Latino?
No.
I'd like to say I'm colorblind. I mean,
It's irrelevant.
No.
Yeah.
I'd like
Well, I think what appeals to me about him, something I can resonate with, is that he's the son of immigrants, the American dream, I guess, and he, when did this land go from the land of opportunity to the land of gimme, 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 gimme? I think I can agree with him on that.
He stands up for what he believes in. He was willing to kind of be the black sheep in his own party.
Constitutional.
An upcomer and has potential.
Obstructionist.
Borderline fanatic.
Who would you like to have dinner with most?
Ted Cruz.
Because?
Intelligent banter, and I believe he would order steak.
Which of the Republican candidates do you think would best stand up to Vladimir Putin?
Ted Cruz.
Ted Cruz.
I don't know.
Donald Trump.
Ted Cruz.
Cruz.
Marco Rubio.
Rubio.
Donald Trump.
Seems like there's a lot of favorable Ted Cruz views around the room, so I'd like just a few people just to sort of explain why Ted Cruz appeals to you.
Look at his record. I believe that he is a person who stands on his convictions, and they all say that, but he has proven that he's willing to do that.
He's argued cases before the Supreme Court, and he's won them.
How many people in the room would consider voting for Ted Cruz in the caucuses? Every single one of you. Mark, we talked about the Rubio and Cruz fundraising contrast a little earlier in the show. Do a little compare and contrast in terms of the reactions at the human level to those two candidates in the focus groups that we saw.
Well, Cruz obviously is much stronger in Iowa than he is in New Hampshire. The group I did in New Hampshire didn't have much use for him. Very strong in Iowa on a range of things. Rubio has got strength in both places, in Iowa and New Hampshire. They like some things, they're skeptical of others. I still think Rubio has a fundamental problem, which is it's hard for him at this point, because he's still not doing that well, to play everywhere. Can he focus, should he focus on either Iowa or New Hampshire, or does he continue to try in both?
I'll tell you, though, the one thing, we both saw the same reaction to that Rubio debate performance, and you saw it in that clip. But boy, we've talked a lot about Rubio's communication skills. That's the first time when I've seen tangible evidence of a group of voters, or two groups of voters in this case, who saw him give a performance, knock it out of the park, and they were wowed by it. That's something he can really build on going forward.
They were wowed, and he has a lot of credibility with them on one level. On another, there is some doubt, is he ready to be president? And that's something that Trump and Bush and all sorts of other candidates, Kasich, will harp on. To the extent Rubio does rise, he's going to have to handle it.
Absolutely right. And I'll say the last thing, which is watch out for Ted Cruz in Iowa. Okay, we will be right back after this. Vegas, baby! On Monday, we will host this show live from my favorite city, Sin City. And on Tuesday, we're hosting a special hour-long episode of Water from the Wynn Hotel on Las Vegas Boulevard. We'll be joined by AFL-CIO Union Chief Richard Trumka and former Los Angeles Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa to preview the first Democratic debate. It's going to be like that movie The Hangover, but without the Bengal tiger.
See you Monday from Vegas. Have a great weekend. Sayonara.